Good morning. The topic of the next session is how businesses can adapt and benefit from AI and big data. It's a very interesting topic. Technology one side, data is that drives everything ahead. Basically, it's information technology. So information is the key that drives all our decisions. We have great legends here who have been in the industry for a very long period of time. Some of them are joining us through Zoom. Mr. Nazri, who has decades of experience and expertise in AI, various accolades and banking background. We have Mr. Girish Ramachandran, who also has decades of experience. From his background, he's a strategist. He has a very nice presentation provided as well. And his main goals are greater good. Now, when it comes to technology companies and greater good, there is always a type of a question mark looking at how the tech industry has taken over and traditional businesses and capitalized. So the whole forum and discussion of today is how businesses can adapt will be very, very insightful. We have Datuk Yasmin Mahmood also joining us, and through Zoom, she's also a well-known, renowned personality in the Malaysian digital scene. And we have Dr. Nikolai, who also is a veteran in the technology space. So we have a very nice setup of panelists who can really provide us with the insights. And with that, we would like to start off with Mr. Nazri, if he could give us his viewpoints on how businesses could use big data or extract big data using AI to enhance their directional processes and objectives, be it in capturing market share or delivering a new, innovative, efficient process. So I would like to ask Mr. Nazri to provide us with his viewpoints.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Moderator. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes. We can.
Okay, thank you very much. I shall begin now. Very good morning, everyone, and esteemed panelists. My slide today, it's about AI-ready businesses and how to make the workforce adopt the right reskilling and upskilling strategies. So we believe that businesses, especially SMEs, are in a position to utilize technology to increase productivity and efficiency to bring down costs, especially in COVID times. The increasing power of AI and the subsequent decrease in costs has resulted in many highly useful potential applications of AI technology. We believe that there is opportunity now for SMEs to use the various applications to maximize their business potential. Here in my session, we offer some applications or use cases that can form part of your strategies to take advantage of AI's potential use, especially for small and medium businesses, and the corresponding need for SMEs to reskill their workforce, not to learn AI coding or programming, but align themselves to the direction that the business owners or the business SMEs, how they chart their growth. So an example of a use case where AI is being used in the context for SMEs and businesses in general, as shared later during the session, will be on business valuation for financing purposes or mergers and acquisition. It's about finding value in businesses in trying times and addressing the gaps or enhance factors that drive up value in the business. So my task today is not to complicate the use of AI, neither oversimplify AI, but merely the practical aspects that would deliver quick wins for any businesses that want to adopt AI. In the last 14 years of our involvement in this field, we have really went through the baptism of fire, various complexities of AI that we've learned to keep it simple and practical. So with the importance of AI being part and parcel of a business operations and strategic charting growth purposes, we can see that there are many benefits. There are 5 key benefits that AI can deliver, and we will seek to address some of these things. So AI can be used in a situation where we get to find out how much the business is really worth and use this as a basis to negotiate with your bankers, investors, and potentially new shareholders, right? So at the end of the day, AI can be used to decipher all your qualitative and quantitative data, your past, present, and future data, can look into your structured and unstructured data, and to look at the kind of business worth or valuation of your across different methods by looking at fundamentals and your peers or comparables. AI can also be used to advise ways to improve the valuation. It's not just giving you a number, but they will be smart enough to look at drivers for value, they look at drivers for growth, and risks that will impair your valuation over time. So of course, there are many, many use cases on which AI can be used, not just for valuation purposes. AI can be used to conduct financial health check, like a mini MRI scan, can do evaluation or due diligence on business partners, can plan for your budget, taking into account 3 different scenarios of COVID in the coming months. Some of the panelists that mentioned earlier talks about the worst is yet to come. We get to see worse things before it gets better, right? So at the end of the day, we have to not only align the businesses to prepare ourselves for worse times or riskier times, but align our workforce so that they can reskill themselves, not just in marketing, sales, HR, operations, but also be familiar with these 9 key areas to promote the businesses to good health. So it's not making them no coding, it's not to make them no programming, it's not to make all your 9 finance people become experts in finance, but appreciation and understanding of what it means to repair a business or restore them to health by knowing these 9 key items that to me are very, very important drivers as part of your business remodeling strategies, as part of charting new growth. So based on McKinsey research, you can see that there is this framework that is very, very, the matrix, very, very useful to look at the time to impact strategies that lead to a quick time to impact or slow versus the impact on earnings and before interest and taxes. We circled how there are 3 key areas that AI can be used to expedite, right? The adoption, the planning and implementation of these strategies, such as revenue growth management, ascertaining the demand for your sales activities, M&A moves such as fundraising, and remodeling your business model to acquire new sales. So this is a very useful matrix on how to prioritize measures and then use AI on top of it, and then build your workforce around it by reskilling their knowledge in these areas. Okay, this is a quick example of how AI can be used to evaluate the valuation of a business and finding out the gaps. So you can see there are 4 methods of valuing a business. Each method has a different impact on the underlying value of a business. It gives you a score. It tells you the story. What happened? Why did it happen? What could happen in the future? It tells you where are the level of risks and returns and what needs to be watched out for. It looks at how sales are being derived using what type of assets and what sort of funding, and identify the cracks, the issues, and the weaknesses that led to either an over-reliance on debt or under-reliance on equity that generate a limited sense of liability or margins, right? And from here, AI can be used to direct the business owners on identify what the action plans that need to be done to address each of those gaps. And this is one of the 9 use cases that you showed earlier. And then AI can also be used without hiring a CFO to look into your future, okay, in terms of your future valuation, future growth, future trajectory, determine what are the kind of numbers that you could get based on current climate and how to achieve them. So with the kind of AI adoption that we are seeing here, it can identify, you can reap 4 types of benefit. If AI cannot achieve this, that means you don't use AI. That's not AI anymore, right? There's just a simple software adoption, but it must lead to a 600% turnaround time in operations, in sales acquisition, in market activities, or even in financial processing. It must lead to reduction of costs by at least 30%. It must identify new opportunities by 10 times faster, quicker, and more volume, and provide you with opportunities to upsell and cross-sell your activities or your core services. Government has been very generous in this regard. Here we show two popular schemes that are available. Just now, KJ talked about, Minister KJ talked about the sandbox grant that they have right now, the NTIS, that it promotes people to actually, businesses to actually come out with new innovations, sandbox it in a limited or multi-site environment. And you get funding just to come out with new innovations and test it out on new grounds. At the same time, agencies like MDEC provides the need for businesses to apply for grant that wants to automate their operations. So in that regard, you have the best of both worlds. The government sector provide you with the funding, right? And technologies are out there, plenty out there to basically for you to adopt. So with that, I leave my presentation back to the moderator and for other speakers to share their wisdom and thoughts on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nazri. Thank you very much. We have some very interesting questions for you later on lined up. I would like to ask Mr. Girish Ramachandran to please present his panel discussion next. And he has some ideas for greater good, and if you could highlight on those as well.
Okay, good morning, Daniel and fellow panelists. Yes. I think it was very enlightening to hear Nazri's comments around being able to replace the CFO with AI. And I think a lot of people are getting scared when they hear these kind of things. So I would like to give a different perspective to answer the question on how businesses can adapt and benefit from AI and big data. And I'd like to sort of take you through a couple of things around national policy. And I think this is very crucial for Malaysia right now, because we've got probably all the building blocks in Malaysia to propel the country using technology. But what we essentially need is very strong national policy and also corporate policy within organizations. And I think this starts with essentially the fourth industrial revolution, yeah, not to be mistaken with Industry 4.0, which is on just manufacturing. But I think we have to understand that we are moving in a very, very alarming pace. And this means every single company and organization out there, including the public sector organizations, need to embrace for change. They need to have the vision to adopt all these things that are coming in. And that's really the key thing, which I'd like to start off with, because I don't think a good 60% of businesses out there are even aware of what's coming along stream. Now, the good news is I think COVID has sort of accelerated that, but it's still a real blend of confusion and also the ability to understand technology is not something that you can pick up a book or go for a 2-week course and embrace it. So in our framework, we use the 4IR aspect, and these are essentially around all the technologies that are out there. Now, we hear a lot on digital, but we must also understand the connectivity with physical and biological, things around synthetic biology, things around robots and nanotechnology. And we heard about cybersecurity, which is putting a bit of a focus on from the government side. And essentially, if we look at all of this, I do believe that AI and BDA are probably the ones which are very relevant for Malaysia. And I think we've got a huge sort of a business growth coming in this space. Now, where is Malaysia in terms of a BDA? This was a report that was done last year. And essentially, we're somewhere between, I would put us at about between 20 to 35% in terms of a scale of 100 as to how mature we are and where we're moving towards. In terms of AI, we're probably around the same. Maybe we are moving a lot faster, especially in the last 6 months in the space of AI. But this is really around people and organizations and understanding how we can move up the scheme. And I'll sort of take you through some of the roadblocks that we've identified from this report. And we've also looked at some of the data we've been doing on the 4IR National Policy Blueprint. And if you look at this chart, the first thing comes out is talent. And essentially, is it about scarcity? Is it about lack of experience? Can we actually train them? Can we relearn? I think those are the questions that are out there. And the second one is on business strategy. Yeah, what Nazri was talking about in terms of getting everything organized. Not so simple, because you need to be able to convince your boards, your shareholders, your management that you're going through a new strategy. And this is always difficult in terms of just having a change. Budget comes out a lot. Technology adoption, technology acquisition does cost money. And in COVID times, I think everyone is looking at trimming the pockets a little bit where they can. And the fourth one is very important to me. We must have use cases. Yeah, what are we trying to solve? Yeah, and if we're not solving something that is local or relating to our corporate vision or our mantra, then it may not make sense. Yeah, a lot of people are going into technology without understanding the use cases. So we understand that COVID has actually come through very, very strong. Airline revenues have dropped, hotel occupancies, retail growth has dropped, vehicle sales in the higher segment has just vanished out of thin air. But we also see opportunities, yeah? We also see opportunities in every one of these segments where there are opportunities for entrepreneurs to come out very strongly with strong value propositions on digital. And digital platforms are really about information and collectively creating knowledge, yeah? And with ML and more advanced BDA, we can actually link these needs and solutions. And more importantly, I think it's also a good stock take to start to digitize and digitalize everything that we have. Now, a lot of businesses in Malaysia haven't even digitized their own information. And I think if you talk about Industry 4.0, we're probably at Industry 2 to 3 in most businesses. And the first step is to actually get it digitized, yeah? Now, how can 4IR actually improve productivity? This is a slide that we always use in our presentation. And it talks about things in terms of each segment. Now, let me pick a few here. AI in healthcare, I think, is going through a phenomenal growth. And every SME, every startup can focus on solving aspects around medical records, around designing new drugs, and so on. And when we look at things around AR, yeah, artificial reality and virtual reality, and even MR, this is very powerful. Now, just imagine us sitting in a conference like this where physically, if I could be sitting on that chair, next to Nikolai, how would that work out? Yeah, and this goes back to what I think the earlier session where Mr. C.C. Pon was talking about the ABCDEFG, and the 5G is crucial for that to happen. Yeah, so digital infra is also very, very critical in Malaysia right now for us to do this. So some of the things that I feel AI and BDA, we could actually get a moving on much faster right now. One of it is what I call the Urban Observatory, which is essentially collecting data in cities and having it at federal level or even at maybe DBKL level, where we're able to have data leased out to entrepreneurs to solve urban issues, whether it is a lady who's walking on the streets alone at night, where you have cameras that are capturing this and making sure that they're safe, going back to police. These can be done. The smart pole is the other thing that I do feel is something that is going to happen very soon, and it should move forward. Then you've got AI around logistics, yeah? Now with COVID, we see a lot of logistics movement going up and down, and we think AI plays a strong role there. And innovation incubators, I think, are the way forward, as well as smart parking. Now, the last part, which I'd like to touch on, is water. I think we have a lot of opportunity to use 4IR technologies in AI, especially for smart water technologies, smart water meters, and so on. And these are opportunities for every businesses out there. So before I end, I'd just like to end with essentially a canvas here. I'm not going to go through it, but I think every single box here is extremely important for us to go through this journey. And training and education is probably the most difficult, because you can't train entrepreneurship in a very short time frame. And number two is you need to do a lot of R&D in order to achieve what we're trying to do. And that takes time, it takes money, it takes government support. And lastly, high value business cases. I keep stressing, we must show the business case of what we're trying to solve here, because if not, we're just going to focus on technology, and that's not going to get us anywhere. So before I go, I do think data is indeed the new oil. And just look at the statistics on the Apple Watch. Yeah, some of us love our watches, but a lot of us are now wearing an Apple Watch. Why? And this is merely because it is now started to give us a lot more information on health and our well-being. Yeah, it's touching us in our hearts, it's touching us in our minds, and it's giving us a lot more data that we never had before. Yeah, so these are the kind of things that I do feel when you merge the physical, biological, and digital world, we have a lot going forward. So I'll end there. Thank you, Daniel, and fellow panelists. I'm obliged to be on this call.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you very much. We have some nice questions for you as well at the end of this. Next, I would like to invite Datuk Yasmin Mahmood to give us a perspective about how businesses could actually, or what she sees. She has a lot of experience all over the years with MDEC, and how she sees some real life case basis that businesses could use AI and big data to enhance and adapt to the new environment that we are in. Datuk, good morning.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, I want to apologize because I am supposed to be there in person and moderating. So Daniel, thank you for the swap. But with an abundance of caution, I just realized that a contact of mine was in Putrajaya. So I thought I'd better stay away from all of you. So, okay, so you did a quick introduction just now. So the best way to describe me, and I'm self-describing myself as a 30-year veteran of the industry. Can you still hear me good?
Yes,
Daniel?
we can hear you, yes. Yes.
Or
we can
is there
hear you.
Lag? Okay, good. So a 30-year veteran, I studied computer science and applied maths in school and have been in the industry since then, mostly in the private sector, in American multinationals, 4 years only in government, and now I am happily semi-retired. So what does that mean? Semi-retirement means that I don't work 9 to 5, and I only choose the kind of work that I want to do and I love to do. So now I'm spending a lot of time with this exciting company called SKYMIND, an AI company. I'm also spending a lot of time with Post Malaysia, helping with the transformation that is powered by digitalization. And I also spend time with Indonesia, with my Indonesian ventures, although with the current COVID, that is somewhat difficult. So as a 30-year industry veteran, I was privy to the waves of change, you know, from the Bill Gates era to the Steve Jobs era, to the dot-com bust, the dot-com boom, dot-com bust. But I have said this, and I say this with more certainty as time goes on, and that is we are now at the most disruptive and the most powerful force at the cusp of the most explosive force, and that has been driven by a whole stack of technology within just the digital space. We have things like IoT, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, big data, and so on. But I think undeniably within all of this bucket of innovation, AI is really the most disruptive. I mean, and AI has been around for a long time, but it is now what I call the coming of age of AI, and AI is coming fast and furious, and it is enabled because of data. There will not be an AI revolution if there had not been a data revolution. So AI is going to touch and every aspect of our lives in the most profound ways. If you look at just from from what Sudha Pichai was saying from Google, AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on, even more profound than electricity or fire. And Vladimir Putin stated, make a pronouncement that the country that dominates AI will dominate the world. And if you look at the economic impact, for instance, this is a report from PwC that says that potential GDP gain by adopting AI by the year 2030 could be anything between 14% to 26%. Now, if you translate this to the global economy, that is about 15.7 trillion impact. So profound impact undeniably. So, on that basis, the future has to be truly reimagined. And this is something that SKYMIND uses a lot as a tagline, which is reimagining the future with AI. And this requires deep, profound discussions on very fundamental topics, such as we heard about some of it earlier. Will AI replace or augment jobs? Will the CFO job be going away, or maybe the CFO job will be made a lot better, a lot value adding because of AI augmentation? There is also discussions around the need for transparency in AI decision making. There's also talks about, will there be bills of rights for AI? So there's a lot of this discussion, and I do want to shout out to a TED Talk that I did called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of AI. So those would be those kind of discussions. But for today, in line with the topic, is things that are really practical, immediate, the to-do things that can be done on the premise that you need to unleash the full opportunity from AI, and not doing so is really at your own peril. So I want to touch on two things. The first one is about leadership. I think there was a discussion just now in the previous channel where Datuk was asking about leadership. So I'm propagating very strongly this, and I truly believe in this concept of adaptive and courageous leadership. When things are moving, when there is no clear goal, and you cannot, even the future is being redefined as we speak, you need to have, leaders who are able to ride on the waves of innovation as opposed to be caught like a deer in headlights. And this requires the characteristic of being adaptive as well as being courageous. And I know that there is a Singularity University is actually developing a whole curriculum around adaptive leadership. So that would be interesting for you to look at. Now, the other thing about leadership is that it has to really start at the very top. It has to be, and I think Girish mentioned quite a fair bit of this earlier as well. It has to be integrated into the company's core business transformation. A lot of times I see AI or even the digitalization projects being put into like a COE and being put more like a showcase. So, okay, I want to do something around innovation. Let's create a COE, put a few people there, put some budget there and see what comes out. Now that will never scale. I mean, it'd be nice to look at, but it'll never scale. So it really has to be integrated in the business transformation, and again, like continuing to what Girish said, it has to start with a problem. I don't think a company should have a AI strategy, but really a business strategy, and how can AI or digitalization in a more general sense can enable or boost it. So problems are revolve around how do you bring about, in this case, AI. How can AI bring about cost efficiencies in your operations? How can AI bring about better customer intimacy with your customer base, and how AI can create new business models or new business revenue streams? But it has to be linked to a problem, a business problem. And the last point I want to make about leadership is that you need to have grand vision, but pilot small, pilot fast, and pilot scale. And this leadership has to be from the very top, And I think not for public listed companies. A lot of them have this technology committees in the board, and this is something which I did when I joined Post Malaysia, when I was appointed as potential chairman about a year plus ago, was to really create what I call a board digital first committee. And this is where the strategies, the business strategies, and the digitalization strategies come together in a more cohesive, coordinated, and a strategic implementation. So that's on leadership, which I think is a very important topic. And the other topic which I want to talk about is on talent. And, talent is absolutely key. And I want to lead into, to SKYMIND Global, where this is the company that I mentioned I'm an advisor for. It is an AI company founded in Silicon Valley, went global in 2016 when the two founders, and they're Malaysians, by the way, founders from Kedah, joined with the founder from Silicon Valley and took this company global, and we are very big in China, Europe, now expand the Southeast Asia footprint in Malaysia. And as we expand, we realize that the need for AI solutions is really just tremendous. But the scalability, our scalability is only limited by our talent availability. And what kind of talent are we talking about? So obviously, when you start with a problem, you need to have the domain expert who understands what AI and data can do towards solving the problem. You need to have AI engineers. These are basically data scientists who are exposed and who are familiar with AI modeling. So these are the people that will build the AI models. And then, we need data labelers. These are the people that will be teaching the models how to become more accurate, to bring about higher accuracy. And then as we deploy, you need to have what we call AIoT engineers or integration engineers to look into the deployment. So there was one question earlier, I think was asked by another panelist, can you find them? No, you cannot find them because you have to nurture them. And this is what we are doing at SKYMIND, so really looking at certification. So we have a big certification program for deep learning engineers in the area of computer vision, time series, as well as NLP. And what we have found is that, this is like a crash course of about 12 weeks, very difficult to pass. And we found that the biggest, the best students, and these are fresh students, it is, somebody mentioned about, do you do reskilling or upskilling? We find that reskilling is rather difficult because, to get people who are already in the current workforce and to get them to teach them into this area of, into new skills is not as easy as, looking at, say, fresh graduates or somebody who's only been in the workforce for the last for 5 years. So engineering students are really the better bets, and the biggest gap really is in coding skills. So I think that is something that we will have to look into. So let me just wrap up with just just picking up on some of the discussion points just now. Whether it is to buy or to build, so I think Datuk Wei was asking that question, and I was itching to just say something about it. So let me just say that from my experience over the last few years, where all this while I was in the supply side, but now I am involved in both the supply as well as on the adoption side. My answer to that is that you subscribe and you build. You need to buy in this time when, you know, it is such so many moving parts, you know, it's rather difficult. And this again going back to Girish's point, you know, assuming you have the talent availability, I think the second part he talked about was budget. So if you just link it to a COE type of budget allocation, that is where you don't have the ROI. Anything that is to be, for instance, in post-Malaysia, any technology or any innovation-driven objectives or projects has to be linked to a business outcome, and it has to have the basic ROI, basic returns, you know. And when you do that, then budget becomes a lot more logical, a lot more you know, structured in the way you ask for budget. So I think I've exceeded my time, so I'll stop there and look forward to further questions later if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Datuk. Dr. Nikolai, various experiences, founding stage at MDEC. Hope you could please give us some insights on how businesses could actually adapt and benefit from AI.
Thank you very much. As you already heard from my fellow virtual panelists, AI, without doubt, will be the disruptive technology of the 21st century. It enables technology adoption, it enables digital transformation, it enables new experiences, and will have a profound impact on industry, societies, and governments. So actually what we did is we wanted to understand as Kearney, what's the state of AI readiness in Southeast Asia? And we work with the EDBI, which is the investment arm of the Economic Development Board of Singapore, to understand really the readiness of Southeast Asia. So we conducted about 110 respondents. We interviewed 25 companies and government agencies across Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And we also examined the economic impact of what AI could have really on overall at the business level as well as at the economic level. And it's clear that AI for Southeast Asia poses both an opportunity as well as a challenge. It will create a platform to advance key sectors for us in South Asia, be it manufacturing, retail, healthcare, financial services. Also several respondents said to more than 70%, AI is absolutely critical for South Asia and AI adoption needs to be accelerated. But it's also very clear, and we heard this from the other panelists before, local AI talent and capabilities are scarce, and especially outside of Singapore. So how do we really address that issue? And I come back to it. If you look overall, what's the status of AI in South Asia? 80% of companies are still in the early stages of AI adoption. In fact, 30% just starting and just thinking about using AI. Only 15% of companies in Southeast Asia are in advanced stages, and these are typically in the more service-related sectors. And when it comes to investments, 83% of companies spend less than half a percentage points of their revenues on AI, so still very small. And if you further drill down investment, it's very clear this region lags by 2 to 3 years behind more advanced companies. On average, the region just spent $2 of per capita investment on AI in 2019. That dwarfs compared to China and the US. US was 155, and US was 155, and China was $21 per capita investment in AI. Now, the standout here is Singapore, $68. But I think Singapore is, of course, not just Singapore, is also across the region because it covers companies and business across the regions. Now, when we model the impact of AI, it's enormous. I think we estimate that AI over the next 10 years can have $1 trillion in additional GDP impact across the region. That's between 10 and 18%, actually quite consistent with, I think, what PwC did. I think what Datuk Yasmin mentioned, the study. And of course, it depends on the sectoral makeup of the economy and depends on sort of the maturity of the AI ecosystems. Now, what is very clear, and I think we heard this also before, AI is not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. Now, we have seen some businesses racing ahead and just saying, look, we should just deploy AI. But what comes loud and clear out in our survey, in our interviews, is that you have to be focused in AI implementation. 80% of the value from AI is driven by less than 20% of the use cases. And that's primarily in sales, marketing, and supply chain management. In fact, in Southeast Asia, the focus is really on revenue management. It gets 2 to 3 times more attention than cost management. And that contrasts with other regions. In Europe, the focus of AI is actually productivity. 70% of companies deploy AI for productivity. Here in Southeast Asia, probably because it's a growing region, focus is really on revenue. Key is that, and I think Datuk Yasmin said this, and Girish as well, one has to focus razor sharply on business problems, on pain points. And the focus has to be drive ruthlessly economic outcome in the near term. And near term means 3 to 4 months, not 1 to 2 years. And I think that's very, very critical, because if you do not achieve that impact, it will be very hard to convince business stakeholders to apply AI at scale, because they don't have the conviction and get the commitment to do so. Now, when we looked at what is holding back still AI in Southeast Asia, 5 issues, 5 challenges came out. The first one is probably the most interesting one. And I would call it the overstated concerns for a talent gap. And now, if you asked respondents, and if you heard this before, 85% of our survey respondents say, look, we have difficulties in finding and attracting the right technical talent. That's true, because I think if you're a utility company or a bank even, you would struggle attracting strong technical AI talent compared to the technology companies. But we believe this talent gap is overstated. And the reason why it's overstated, because the actual technical skill requirements today for deploying AI are not that deep anymore. Because you have readily available and ready to deploy AI models, particularly from the big technology providers. We work quite a lot with AWS, and it's very clear models are available. And even in the AI implementation I've been involved in, you don't need deep technical skills. Yes, you need access to data scientists, but you can also find them elsewhere. So therefore, you can actually mitigate the talent gap by upskilling the existing business talent you have in the organization. And that's a very important point, because you won't find the technical talent, so you have to really upskill the existing business talent, which is also important because they understand actually your business problems and the pain points you need to address. The second challenge is not surprising. I think South Asia has a very fragmented and very nascent AI ecosystem. Over 3/4 of the respondents see this as still immature, and particularly outside Singapore. And it's a problem because as a company, particularly as an SME, you cannot find the right providers for AI. And this, of course, impacts the willingness and ability of companies to deploy AI. Now, that's not surprising. I think it's typical not just for AI, but also for digital in the region. And here, it's very important that you create, and I think what Malaysia is trying to create, you have to create test beds at scale. Now, I wanted to say, don't do sandboxes, but do test beds, but I think the Malaysian term here used is sandbox. But I think the key is you need to bring users and providers together. You need to scale it up. It cannot be a small little experiment because you need to create data sets. And you need to also test societal impact and regulatory impact, because that's important, and I think we'll come back to that point. The third one, probably also not surprising, is sort of the evolving data and governance and infrastructure. Over 50% feel that data quality, infrastructure, and governance are inadequate. So if you disjointed data collection, you have lack of quality standards, you have antiquated data infrastructure, and of course, that creates challenges in harmonizing and extracting data and creates security concerns. Now, key here is that you have to think through how you're going to address it as a business. What doesn't work in our experience is if you address this as a big building block challenge, like a big IT project. And we have seen quite a number of companies who are trying to do this. What you really, again, have to do is a two-speed approach. Focus data governance issues or near-term problem, while simultaneously balance it with the longer-term building block address. So I think creating that balance always with the focus on the near-term business problems is important. Otherwise, you will get lost in the transformation of your data governance infrastructure. The fourth one was a bit surprising. It was really about new regulations. And I have to say, I didn't see that coming. I think, of course, regulatory constraints, privacy protection, data sharing restrictions, on-premise storage requirements can be a challenge. But we saw, for example, a financial regulator in the region did not allow AI-based credit risk scheme model for SMEs because they felt it's a black box. And if they didn't want to do it because they didn't know how to explain potential rejected applicants, why they were rejected. And that created sort of a challenge. So really having a forward-looking approach to regulation is important, and really engaging the regulators early on. Last one, and we heard this before, I would call it the user resistance to AI adoption. And I think in our interviews, two things really stood out. Some people believe the impact of AI will be catalytic, and it will be dramatic, and will make a lot of workforce redundant very, very quickly. Others felt it will be more gradual, as we've seen so far in technology changes. So AI will replace tasks, not humans, will augment human behaviors, and therefore we will not see a catalytic impact on workforce displacement. But it's a big debate out there. Personally, we believe it will be gradual, and as we have seen before, because the adoption curve will not be so quick. But it calls for both short-term and long-term management of the capability challenges which we have seen. So last point, and a wrap up. Of course, it calls for actions. I think governments have to think about national AI strategy. It's good to hear that Malaysia is in the process of finalizing it. Second, I think you need to really start steering long-term change in education systems. And third, you need to really put testbed at scale in place. Business users, I repeat the point, which I think came out loud and clear. You need to focus on near-term business problems. If you do not solve pain points, you will get lost in the implementation. That's important. Providers as well, because it's important. It's not about putting big building blocks in place. It's about making sure companies can solve problems. So let me just close here. I think it's clear. I think ecosystem of AI in Southeast Asia is still in nascent stages. There's a lot of excitement about it. There's massive value at stake, $1 trillion. And I think the race for AI started. By the way, I forgot to mention, this is a study actually which we're publishing on Thursday, so it will be available then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Nikolai. We've got some very nice insights over here today, and some very nice questions as well. We'll probably try the rapid fire system with all our esteemed panelists. The first question I have, is AI a revolution or an evolution? Because looking at how technology is, technology provides us with connectivity. We connect our systems. Within those systems lies in data. Is that data a natural progression, which is evolution, or it is revolution? Because as we go along with technology, data is inherited in all of that. And looking at that data, then we make business decisions, we make business strategies. And that's where the other question came up is, should we hire reskill for businesses? So the first question I have is it AI that complicated? Is it a natural progression of technology? Or is it just like, is it revolution or is it evolution? So I'd like to ask the panelists about that. And I'll probably go with Dr. Nikolai first, if he could give me some response to that.
Yeah, I think it's an evolution, but with a disruptive impact. And I think technologies have always followed S-curves. And I think it started gradually. AI, as Nazri said earlier, for quite a while, but I think we are getting into truly an inflection point, and therefore it has a disruptive impact and could have a revolutionary impact, but it's not a revolutionary technology per se yet.
Right. Mr. Nazri, would you like to speak next?
Yes, thank you very much. If you look at the literal meaning of revolution and evolution for those in the audience who needs a little bit of distinction. So revolution involves a turnaround, a sudden, complete or radical change in something, while evolution looks at the gradual development or changes over a period of time. To me, as far as Malaysia is concerned, the evolution happens after a revolution took place in Malaysia. So that's took place about 3 to 4 years ago when AI and data analytics really took off in a big way, in a more pronounced way, first with the fintech, or rather first with the financial institutions, followed by the PLCs, the professionals, and so on. So the revolution in Malaysia started to take place only about 3 to 4 years ago, where you see a sudden, complete, radical way or wanting to do something, and whether for better or for worse, FIs, banks, finance houses start jumping into it. Banks started to restructure, form their own corporate innovation labs, and departments and digital labs, and so on and so forth. So the euphoria or in akin to revolution took place in those periods, but over time they suddenly realized that maybe chatbots are not the way to go in Malaysia yet. Maybe they realize blockchain is still rudimentary, is still taking place. Payments start getting very crowded, and so on and so forth. So the perception and the learning points evolves over time. And that's where the evolution comes in once the initial base euphoria has started to dwindle or stabilize a little bit. That's my 2 cents worth on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Datuk, Datuk Yasmin, could you please give your insight, please, on this? Hello? We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to unmute. Anyway, so as a technology, this has been a long time in the making. So it is an evolution from a technology perspective. But over the last few years, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, there has really been an inflection point. And the inflection point was driven largely from, like I mentioned earlier, from this data, from big data and the aggregation of structured data and unstructured data. It was also, the inflection point was also driven by computing power, cloud computing, the availability of great computing power as well as connectivity. But the impact, I think, although the technology is an evolution, but the impact of it could be revolutionary.
Wonderful, thank you. Girish, could you please give us your insight, please?
Yeah, I think we have to go back to fundamentals, because you can answer both those questions with a yes. My feeling is you have to go back to the human beings and the rakyat of Malaysia and address their issues with artificial intelligence in a manner that is sustainable. We are faced with a lot of issues right now, and we need to solve these issues. What Nikolai was mentioning about the near term, 3 to 4 months, is spot on. So I think it's both. We have a revolution happening right now, and we hope to use this to evolve ourselves as human beings in society and solve all those social issues which are out there using technology.
Wonderful, thank you. Then the next question I would have is, basically, from what I understand now, from what the responses were, is the data is there. It's a natural progression from technology to getting into the data. And then we look at that data and we use some sort of systematic approach to understand the data and try to obtain some sort of edge in our business decision-making process. What happens when the data evolves? how do you react to it then? Do you get my question?
Yeah. Let me take this
Dr.
question
Nikolai,
first. Oh,
what happens when because what we're doing here is now looking at data and trying to extract some sort of edge from there, or some sort of identification of a directional trend, which we look to exploit by using AI. But there will come a time when everyone does the same thing, and that data now, or that edge slowly starts to disappear. So how do you handle that then?
Well, I don't think so. I think as we heard a couple of times, you solve either business pain points or you focus on business opportunities. And these are normal business problems. AI just makes you smarter. AI is not I repeat, it's not a panacea. Yes. No? Yes. And you just apply it and magically you will win in the market. You still have to execute well. It just makes it better. It makes you smarter. It supports it. I think it helps you drive, for example, on the revenue side, next product to buy decisions. No, but it's not, if you apply that, you have different product structures anyhow across different countries, you would recommend always the same product to everyone. So it would equalize competitive advantages. It just helps you execute better, both on the revenue and the productivity side.
Thank you. Mr. Nazri, would you please give us an insight there?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Dr. Nikolai that first of all, we must understand the context of data. Yeah. So data, there are generally three types: structured, unstructured. And when you talk about structured data, it relates to things like your phone bills, your financial statements, your journals, your academic records, your application forms. Whilst unstructured data relates to text news, information that is available in text, where 80% of the world data comprises of. Then, of course, there's image data, data that can be converted into metadata that will then be analyzed into what you call 5 stages of analysis, of which the strong AI relates to the predictive and prescriptive analytics. So AI is not a dashboard, AI is not matrix, AI does not borrow a watch and tell you the time. AI mimics the human brains and solve complex problems. So there is a certain misconception that AI is basically a dashboard or a matrix, right? But it has to do more complex than that. AI is not part of RPA. It is a higher version of complex human solving. So besides that part, what I feel that, do you know that every human being or business owner makes about 35,000 business decisions in a day? So that's one human making 35,000. An adult makes 35,000 decisions a day, subconsciously or consciously. So you square it off, it becomes about 1.2 trillion. So you use AI to augment that manual thinking, that 35,000 subconscious and consciousness, that gives you about 1.2 trillion decision-making process. So AI can elevate and augment that 1.2 trillion decision-making processes, and then it can map out into 12 extreme situations based on granularity, based on severity. That's 14.7 trillion sets of data that can be processed, analyzed, augmented, and make it predictive and prescriptive, right? So there's no way data or data associated with an entity, whether it's a business or a person, would have the same situations, and it will be redundant or unuser friendly at all. So the way we harness data can extrapolate. Data can be extrapolated into trillions of situations involving not just one entity, but multiple entities, and turn it into a decision-making process. Yeah, I think that's to allude to your question earlier, whether will data remain stagnant and will that be evolving, will that be revolutionizing? There will always be new insights, new uncovering or discovery of new things from data, whether it's fragmented or whether there's gaps in between, and any form of types, whether it's structured, unstructured. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nazri. Datuk?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, just to rephrase what the two have already mentioned, AI is not like a magic box. You just throw in data and then you call it an AI box and that's it. Voila, it's gonna just generate something. But it will still be dependent on how astute are your business, identifying the business pain points. It will be dependent on how rich is your data sets. A lot of times, we go into try to understand, solve a problem, then we have this grand vision. Then you go down to it and say, oh, we don't know where the data is. So, aggregating the data, harnessing it, and harnessing also, it depends also on the talent. How well are you able to hire the right talent to be able to do the, to use the tools to build learning models, and to apply them and to deploy them. So it's still, still a lot of variable that will determine how well your AI implementation is versus the next.
Thank you, Datuk. Girish, could you please give us your insight?
Yeah, I think I think we have to go back to the fundamentals of business strategy. Yeah, I think if we want to have successful businesses, we have to look at how we are going to change the business strategy, because in the fourth industrial revolution, everyone needs a new change in business strategy. It can be a small petty trader all the way to the big MNCs. And how do you look at AI to assist in doing that? It doesn't change the fundamentals of business, yeah? Just because you have a lot of data, it doesn't mean that you've got a great business model. You still have to go back to the building blocks of a business. Where are your revenue streams coming from? What are your value propositions? And how do you compete in the market? If your business is not based on fundamentals, then you may not be in existence in 12 months because technology is evolving. So yeah, I agree. I think look at it as an enabler, but it is a very interesting enabler that can propel businesses and society to move forward. And my last point is, I think Malaysia is actually very, very fortunate, because we're sitting right in smack in between 2-3 very large giants. And if anybody wants to test technology, I do think Malaysia is a fantastic place to come here and have those test beds. And I think the government is looking a lot into projects like this. And I think we have a very interesting 5 years ahead in the space of AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you very much. The last question I have is, then we need to look at some case bases of how businesses could really use AI and big data to enhance their business in this current environment where there is a huge amount of transformation. So if we could have some case bases for some businesses on how they could use AI and adapt to it in this environment. So Dr. Nikolai, please.
Yeah, I think you have to, I fully agree. It has to be business case and use case driven and very clear. I think it depends on the business. I think, as I mentioned, at the moment, most companies in Southeast Asia focus on revenue and supply chain, obviously for obvious reasons in the COVID pandemic. I think we have some, for example, the hyper-personalized offers of the e-commerce platforms. Tokopedia in Indonesia is a great example. They doubled within a couple of months their sales by applying AI. I think other logistics providers have focused on predicting the delivery dates, which not just for e-commerce, but I think for bigger logistics undertaking. And normally logistics company can do this by applying AI, machine learning. They achieve 95% accuracy. So there's a lot of use cases. I think the key is you need to identify the relevant ones in your specific function where you focus the business problems. I think consultants like us and others create a library of potential use cases. You have 70, 80 use cases. I think we asked a lot of the interviewees and survey respondents to do it. So you're not short of use cases, but others the relevant one for you in your business problem. That's the key.
Mr. Nazri, could you please go next?
Yeah, currently our group is involved working with various SME agencies, government, and what is pressing right now is not so much to talk about the concept, the vision of AI as if it's a normal time. It's not normal times for us. So the government has identified 150,000 SMEs that are deemed too strategic to fail in Malaysia. So as we know, SMEs, close to 1 million of them in Malaysia, constitutes about more than 90% of establishments, 30 to 40% of GDP, and higher, more than 60% of workforce. So out of this million of SMEs, 150,000 has been identified by various agencies in Malaysia that cannot fail. So if they fail, there'll be a catastrophic, and domino effect on employment levels, on GDP, on what you call the economic value add to the economy. And we believe that 70 to 80% of the entire SME population in Malaysia are very badly affected. So that leaves you with about 20 to 30% survival. We cannot speak AI as if it's normal times. We cannot talk about conceptual, idealistic, we cannot celebrate achievements because that's only less than 1%. So from a policymaker's point of view, they are saddled with this problem of not having SMEs to fail. So there are 5 sectors that are identified. Out of the 150,000, they belong to these 5 sectors. The 5 sectors are, number 1, manufacturing. Second is logistics and services. Third is professional services. Fourth is agriculture. And fifth is the retail and wholesale. So when you have 150,000 SMEs that needs to be restructured, remodeled, right, to be able to restore and rebuild them, how do you carry out the intervention? So AI needs to be used as a survival tool. It's no longer a sexy topic to talk about, say 3 years ago, 2 years ago, right? Because of COVID. So you can't deploy 100 consultants out there to help 150,000 SMEs just to conduct financial health check, business health check, do business plan, do restructuring plan. You can't. By the time you finish doing it, the companies would have collapsed. So behind the scenes, there are serious productivity issues when you rely on too much or too many human experts to carry out intervention plan on a voluminous scale. 150,000 SME, you're going to deploy 10,000 consultants? How are you going to rally this together? But what if AI can be used to do a massive screening within 1 day, massive customized, personalized roadmap within 2 days, right? And determining what the areas of intervention in 20 areas that need to be restructured, reschedule their loans, and basically carry out the reformation of their business model. So we're not saying AI should replace human being, but as what some of us suggested, is the augmentation, is the augmented intelligence that we see human and technology work hand in hand to help a pressing problem case point, which is the 150,000 SMEs that cannot fail, that should not fail. Because if they fail, it has a catastrophic impact. So from a very pragmatic standpoint of AI, we are not in normal times, we're in new times. So AI must be turned into a survival toolkit that can propel businesses moving forward. It's not about future, 3 years, 5 years down the road. It's about that quick wins, that 3 to 9 months of survivability that we need to be concerned about. And that's where my presentation is all centered about. It's about how to use AI to ensure survivability of these strategic SMEs for the first batch of 150,000 can survive without over-relying on human labor that can drag over a period of time and take a lot of costs. Right? So this is where AI and human must work together to achieve a certain desirable goal. In this case, in the COVID times, where you see about 70 to 80% are hard hit by the impact of COVID and the impact of the lifting of the moratorium or the gradual implementation of the credit measures by banks and amongst and creditors, of course. So with that, that's my 2 cents worth. I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Nazri, I don't want you to go. I want you to answer one more question, or just expanding on what you just said.
Okay.
How would you convince that 150,000 SMEs to the transformation then? How would you convince them?
Yeah, as what Dr. Nikolai and Girish and Dr. Yasmin said, right? I think at the end of the day, it's either pain points or opportunities. So a portion of them, about 77% of them are stuck with inventory or receivables tied up. Okay, whether we like it or not, it all centers to the financial cash flows and all that, right? So about 77 to 80% of SMEs cash flow is tied up in receivables and inventories. Okay, about 2/3 of them are heavily geared. Heavily geared means that equity to debt ratio surpass that by at least 1.5 times. So for every dollar of debt, or every dollar of equity they have about $1 and RM1.50 of debt. Can be short-term and medium-term. Speaking of which, about 70% of their financing exposures are short-term. So we have a duration mismatch. We have a lot of expenses Okay, and yet we have a shortage of funding or over-reliance on short-term funding. It's our long-term funding to tide through the crisis, right? So the moratorium effect has only a limited effect. It's a temporary life measure, whether it's personal loan on the directors or company loans. So when you speak about AI to them, they will shut their minds off. Say, so what? So unless you tell me what can AI do? Can AI tell me to get me new partners? Can AI gives me 10% more sales? Can AI be able to help me reduce my debt and explain to the bank how to restructure my balance sheets and P&L? So this is a real issue on the ground right now as we speak for these 100 over 1,000 SMEs, and what more, the 1 million over SMEs, they are not part of this radar. So unfortunately, this is the situation we're in, but AI needs to hit the nerve of the business owners, reduce the pain point, or gives more opportunities, right? So I think it all centers around that, and whether it's finding new partners, whether it's planning their cash flow, whether it's to get new funding, whether it's to apply for grants, everything needs to be done faster, quicker, cheaper, okay, and then more effective. Okay, very demanding situation, but this is what the business owner's mindset is right now for this 150,000 or even the whole cohort, right? So we have to understand them more, putting business first and then work around it. Use AI to understand the psychological mindset, the strategic mindset, as what Girish said, back to fundamentals. So what do you think are the 80% that caused their balance sheet to be weakened this time around? And even the PLCs, public listed companies, right? So these are the things that AI should revolve or evolve around, to address these pain points or opportunities as has been said earlier. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nazri. Datuk, could you please go ahead with the question? Is how could businesses actually adapt some case basis, please?
Yeah, so to continue from what Nazri was mentioning, to SMEs, if you were to say, I've got an AI project, then it's automatically there is like a block. So begin with the problem. And I want to give a specific example of which I'm very excited about. It's something that a project that at SKYMIND the team is currently doing, which is looking into a durian. There's a durian's a durian company, a company that produces durian paste to be exported to China. And this paste needs to be so pure that even a little bit of impurities could be rejected at 5 times penalty of the actual price. In the area of COVID, and in the past, it was how they used to do it was to spread out thinly the paste, and then a human being, a foreign labor, would actually go and pick up, the impurities, which could include, worms sometimes, not to discourage you from durian, but imagine during COVID when you cannot have the foreign workers to come in, and so they said, okay, how can you solve this problem? So we brought in, just a video to capture the movement on how the impurities were being plucked out, and use AI and deep learning to understand that behavior. And by doing this, it solved so many of the problems. Productivity improved by almost 200%. They now can, now they are moving towards robotics, automation, and so on. So again, AI is not something fancy. AI is not something in the future. AI is now. But if you have to link it to actual business outcomes and start with the problem and bring it as AI as an enabler, and that is how SMEs especially and all organizations need to approach AI.
Thank you, Datuk. Girish, you could go next, please.
Yeah, I think there are 3 things that AI can absolutely move fast in taking use case studies and solving them. One is on the circular economy. I think this is a great time to rethink our long-term strategies in business, and every large organization should really have a relook at, what is their purpose. So the circular economy is something that is a must. Number 2 is I would add in the sharing economy into the flow of this, and couple that with the digital economy. You probably have some fantastic value propositions to work on. I would take Dato' Yasmin's example of the durian, and I would focus on agriculture. I would focus on food security to create more values and more jobs in Malaysia. It's very, very simple. We've got all the recipes, we've got all the ingredients, we have all the cooks. We just need to get it going. Thank you.
Thank you. Girish is very, very, I think it's about COVID. COVID has done quite a bit of a show this year that many of the changes that have come, they tend to be seen temporary, but they could actually be permanent, and it's very hard to tell. And this transformation is really affecting everything, and therefore it's also centralizing a lot of stuff into a few hands. For example, it's hard to imagine that the entire retail sector would go down and Lazada and Shopee would just keep on growing. Similarly, Amazon in the US. And here we have huge amount of SMEs, 150,000 of them, who have to find a way out, deploying technology. There are probably opportunities out there as well, whereas you can actually now go global. But the challenge is also, the transformation is really pushing things very, very fast. I don't know if I have any more time to go on, but it's, no. Yeah, so I think this is where we wrap up. There are lots of open-ended questions over here, and very nice insights that we received today about AI and SMEs and transformation and government grants and what Malaysia should do and the ecology of technology for tomorrow. So I think with this, I conclude this session, and thank you very much.